Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about something that I consider to possibly be the biggest cause for women not going to talk to someone when they're feeling all the feelings we've been talking about. And that is this kind of subtle gaslighting. I'm Leah Batlle-Rafferty, and this is Memoirs of a Neurodivergent Latina. I want to start with a story. So last year, I went with a friend that I hadn't seen since college to dinner. And at some point during the really nice dinner, I said, "Oh, I now know that I'm autistic." And the response I got was really interesting. It was like they were trying to reassure me that there was no way I could possibly have this thing. I would say something like, in college, I felt very separate from other people. I felt like I didn't quite fit in. And he'd be like, "Well, we all chalked it up to you being naive and being raised in a kind of very sheltered family." Or I would say that I didn't feel like I quite belonged in a group. And he'd say, "But in our living arrangement, we were always arguing about having you become a part of us." So everything I said had an argument about why what I was thinking or feeling wasn't the reality of the thing. And here's where chameleoning, especially if you're good at it, can kind of bite you in the butt. Because clearly I was good at it. I'm really glad that people thought well of me. But I felt disconnected and I felt very different. And I didn't show it or something. So why did I bring up this story? Because this story really highlights the kind of subtle gaslighting that occurs when people are trying to be your friend and trying to make you feel like it's not as bad as all that. Not that I really think being autistic is bad now that I've kind of wrapped my mind around the term, but they try to reassure you. They try to make you feel like it's not that bad. And the problem with that is that in the process of doing it, they're making you doubt yourself. And for some people, maybe those words would be reassuring. But for anyone who actually has any sort of invisible issues, it can make you not go to somebody to speak because clearly you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And if it only happened a couple of times, you would probably brush it off, right? But if it happens sort of constantly throughout your adulthood, at some point, it really does sink in and you start to think, okay, well, I'm just making excuses for myself. Clearly, I am lazy. Clearly, I am irresponsible. Clearly, XYZ, right? Because everyone is telling you that there's nothing different about you. Other subtle gaslighting sort of things that happen around you that can absolutely be affecting you are all of the kind of thrown out comments that people make as they speak that minimize what neurodiversity is like. So when people say things like, "My OCD is acting up," or, "Oh, it's just my current ADHD," or whatever it is, there's all of these comments that are made sort of unmindfully that make everything seem like it's less than it is, or make it seem like it's different than it is, right? These are all diversities with their own quirks and their own hard things and their own awesome things. And by people just throwing the terms around, they lose meaning. And then there are the societal messages that are still very much gaslighting, but you hear them everywhere. You hear them from all kinds of places, and they reach into your psyche and make you feel like, maybe I am not paying attention. Specifically, when I say not paying attention, it's all of the stuff out there that talks about how to tell if someone is paying attention to you. What's the top one? Yeah, eye contact. Guess what people like me are not very good at? Yeah, eye contact. Has nothing to do with whether I'm listening to you or not, right? Other things, if they're sitting still, leaning a certain way, well, if somebody has ADHD, sitting still might really not be something they can do. But society says if they're not doing that, then they're not paying attention. So almost every single thing written out there about body language and how that shows that somebody is paying attention to you is completely wrong for many of the neurodiversities out there. The messaging that gaslights you starts very young. And this is for you parents out there, because I noticed it with my son. And sometimes it really, really made me mad. An example of this was a teacher had told eldest that he had to pretend to be a certain product and flew in a plane, and he had to talk about all the states that he flew over. And the teacher was really, really mad at him because he would not describe the states. He wouldn't talk about the states at all. And clearly he wasn't paying attention to her. So note what's going on here, right? He's getting messaging from the people who are supposed to be shepherding him to the next grade and who are supposed to be his role models, that he's being bad, that he's not paying attention, that he's not listening. So I went in and I talked to him in front of her and I said, "What's the matter? Why can't you do this?" His answer was, "Well, if I'm a product and I'm getting sent to another state, I'm in a box. I can't see anything. I can't describe anything. I am in the box." So then finally the teacher changed her tune and started to say things like, "Oh, well, let's just pretend the captain has a loudspeaker and announces things. What would the captain be announcing about the states?" Yeah, it was that simple a fix. And with that simple a fix, she could have prevented some psychological damage that happened to him when this authority figure basically decided that he was being whatever, abrasive, anti-authority, whatever it was that went through her mind. Her reaction to it feeds into his way of seeing himself. So imagine 12 years of school plus kindergarten, and even if only 3 teachers during, let's say, elementary school were anything like this, that is 3 full years that my child was exposed to somebody who did not have the patience to sit down and try to understand his point of view in order to understand that most of the time this kid was not anti-authority in the least. In fact, all he wanted to do was hide in the back and read a book or, etc. The point is, his reactions were because the person in authority wouldn't listen to what he needed and was telling him that he was wrong or he was bad. And if you get told you're wrong or bad in subtle ways, right? This is not a teacher telling him directly you're wrong or bad, but it is a teacher getting upset because he didn't do the assignment the way she wanted it to, and she wasn't willing to listen to him. If this happens often enough, by the time you're in college, you've internalized a lot of stuff about who you are, how good you are or how bad you are, how unable or incapable you are. Even with all of the special needs education going on out there, kids still get put in these positions. So it starts very young. Then you go to college and, even middle school, right? Kids aren't nice. So then you're getting messages from the other kids about who you are and how you are and how you are not like them. And now I'm going off tangents. But the point is, the messaging occurs over and over and over and over again. Society tells you you're not listening if you don't do X, Y, Z. Other subtle gaslighting, right? Well, or not so subtle gaslighting. ADHD. Oh, everyone all these boys are being diagnosed with ADHD, so it's not really real. Or everyone's on the spectrum these days, or any sort of comments like that immediately minimize your experience. Now, add that to the fact that when you start to think about whether or not you have these things, you start to read these checklists, and the checklists are scary, right? They make you seem less capable. They make you seem like there's a lot of things wrong with you. And most of those checklists don't say anything good. So you have the gaslighting going on. You have the research that tells you all these negative things about who you are if you have this stuff. And it becomes really hard to admit or to talk to someone or say anything about how you're struggling. You don't want people to judge you. You don't want people to minimize you. You have already internalized that it's not really real, that you're just making it up to make up excuses for being lazy or being irresponsible or any other number of things that are going through your head or through my head, because I've definitely had the irresponsible one a lot. But it's not true. And breaking out of that mental cage that people put you in is hard. It's one of the hardest things I think that any of us do when we finally step forward and go, okay, no, I really am different. I really am struggling. And I really need to talk to somebody. So, for those of you who are listening, and I hope there's several of you who have been questioning and wondering and maybe listening just to see what it's like. If you hear yourself in any of these words, if you feel the way I talk about feeling, know that it isn't just in your head. I can't diagnose you, obviously, and I'm not saying that you're going to have what I have or that, anyone is going to have any form of severity or part of the spectrum or whatever. But I am saying that if you are doubting yourself to the point where you have a ton of negative self-talk, where you're depressed or you're feeling burnt out or doubting your abilities, that maybe you should take the first step and just look for somebody who knows these things. Maybe get some referrals from people around you. There are people in the community somewhere that have kids with ADHD or have kids with OCD or have kids with autism. There are people in the community who might have been diagnosed, right? Sometimes libraries can be a good resource, or online. There's a lot of good websites on this. There's some assessments that you can take online. And I'm going to create a resource section in my website. So just so you know, I'm recording this a little early. And it should have links to all of these places that you can go and look and kind of do a little bit of self-exploration, or even talk maybe to some advocates who know a little bit more about what these things look like. There are a lot of ways that you can start this journey, but if you are feeling all of those things that I talked about, then help yourself and start looking around, because a lot of us struggled the same way. A lot of us struggle the same way, and there is nothing wrong with you. Thank you for tuning in to Memoirs of a Neurodivergent Latina. This podcast was written, edited, and produced by me, Leah Batlle-Rafferty. All music is by Carlos Neda, and this podcast is part of Labrat Solutions, Inc.